nervous and excited. It's hard to separate the two. Doubts played on my mind. They were fueled by the breaks in training over the last couple of years, the long return from being sick, and knowing that I'm not as fit as I used to be. This race was uncharted territory for me. It was my first backyard ultra. It's a simple format. Run 6.7 kilometres within the hour, then do it again on the hour, every hour. And the winner is the last one standing. As is my habit, I arrived very early to the race start at Brimbank Park. Being early allowed me plenty of choice to pick which marquee I set up under, and naturally I picked one nice and close to the starting corral. The list of gear felt excessive. Chair, table, esky, drink bottles full of sports drink and water, gels, hammer bars, chips, sandwiches, changes of clothes, lots of socks, 6 pairs of shoes, first aid, gloves, hats, sunglasses and sunscreen filled my space. Everything was placed in specific spots, all planned carefully in order to reduce my thinking and keep the time between laps, or yards as they're known, as stress-free as I could make it. 1900 hours on Friday was the race start, 7 PM. I had just come off a night shift from work that morning. This meant I'd slept during the day. I wondered if the shift work would help. With time to spare, I chatted with other runners around me, snoozed, and tried to chill out. Happily, I was successful in that. As 1900 approached, I felt relaxed and ready. We're off running. I've never been in a race where everyone sets out so slowly. Good reminder, it's not the fastest runner that wins. I made a point to keep my pace slow and easy. It was difficult not to get too carried away. The course is awesome, really enjoyable, but much more difficult than I predicted prior to the race. Each yard is made up of 3 different loops. Loop 1, 2.35 kilometres. A relaxed downhill to begin with, followed by a couple of uphills that are best walked before returning through the event hub. Loop 2, 3.2 kilometres. This is the crux of the course. It has the main climb, which is relatively steep and long. The downhill provides a challenge for the quads. It also has a couple of fords as river crossings, which were dry while I was running this race. Loop 3, 1.38 kilometres. Pretty simple half loop in the opposite direction of loop 1. It cuts out the main hill on that loop and brings you back to the end of the yard. The hills made it harder than I appreciated beforehand. I found my heart rate was sitting higher than I hoped in order to keep the pace I needed to. I was completing each yard between 49.44 and 53.29. The slower ones involved a stop at the toilet on the way. I was pretty happy with this time. Running felt comfortable and it gave me enough time in between yards to get whatever I needed all sorted. In each break I had a simple checklist. Temperature, maintenance, nutrition, rest. Temperature. Make sure my body temperature was right. Conditions were cool despite expecting a hot event due to the race being in the main part of the Australian summer. Overnight I put on a dressing gown as I sat at that aid station, ensuring I wouldn't get too cold. It was easy to slip on as I sat down and slip off to go out and start the next yard. Maintenance. This covered whatever was needed to get through the next yard. Anti-chafe cream, changing shoes and socks, grabbing a headlamp or anything else as they came up. I also made a point of limiting any maintenance tasks to one only so that my brain, my thoughts wouldn't get overwhelmed and I wouldn't feel rushed. Nutrition. Eat and drink as per the plan or slightly altered as needed. Also make sure I had with me the gels that I was going to use out on the next yard. I consumed most of my calories during the break and topped it up about halfway out on each yard. I used the bottom of the main climb as the prompt to take in those top up calories. With everything set and ready for the next yard, I used the remaining time to rest. So that might have been a couple of minutes before we had to get up into the starting corral to start the next hour, maybe a bit longer. This usually involves sitting in the chair with the legs up. Between a couple of the laps, I lay down with my legs elevated as well. During this time, I used some breathing techniques to settle the mind and bring down the heart rate. 3 times, I managed to venture into the first stage of sleep for about 3 to 5 minutes each time. Now, the best part of this race is the people. Plenty of chats out on the course and at the event hub. It seemed that no matter how anyone was doing it during the event, they were always able to offer encouragement to others. In between these chats, I was still able to get into my own headspace and find a rhythm. Everyone just seemed to know when to talk and when not to. The race went quickly. Each yard ticked by. Run easy, walk the hills, don't trip on the rock at the start of the main downhill. Chat, don't chat. After the first 2 yards, it was night time. The moon was out and bright, providing enough light for most of the course that I didn't have my headlamp on for maybe half of it. In the early part, the toilet stops were a bit too frequent, so I reduced the amount of fluid that I was taking in, and that seemed to get things just about right. And going through the night, I stopped thinking about how many yards or kilometres that I had already run. I stopped thinking about how much further I was going to keep going. Most of the time, I was successfully absorbed in the moment. After 6 yards, my shoes, well, they weren't feeling quite as good as they were before. Not like there was any real problem, they just were no longer comfortable. So I switched, and as a result, my feet felt almost brand new. 8, 9, 10 yards completed. My legs were now hurting. My quads, they were feeling stiff and sore. A few aches in my feet. This was expected, but it didn't worry me. If there was any hint of a problem, it was now taking more effort just to maintain the pace. It was a thought. It passed by, and I didn't really hold on to it. Yard 11 was more difficult. My legs didn't feel as strong. I lost some coordination in my running form. It took a fair bit of concentration just to keep moving forward. Finished this yard in the time of 53:34, which was the slowest I'd done so far by 5 seconds, but this one didn't involve a toilet stop. And that's okay. I reminded myself that they all couldn't feel as smooth or as good as the first 10. And yard 12 started okay. I was running amongst the usual group that I had for the last few yards. It hurt more, but I seemed to be moving fine. Seeing the time on the clock as I finished the first loop, I noticed it had taken over 20 minutes to get there, and not between 14 and 17 as it had earlier. Maybe everyone else was running slower too. My mind accepted being a bit slower. Just keep moving. The downhills on the second loop of yard 12 became the challenge. My left quad started seizing up. I experimented with different styles of running, trying to keep moving at a decent pace. Some of them worked, but only for a short time. Then my leg muscles would really start failing on me, off and on for the remainder of this yard. Another runner assured me that we'd make it within the hour. I knew we would, but my mind was occupied with trying to come up with a way to stop the downward spiral that my running was taking. In at 56:25, just over 3 minutes left. Enough time for some sports drink, put my feet up for a moment, and then it was back in the corral. But my legs failed me. The muscle weakness was deep, and every time I tried to run, one or both legs would cramp. Walking also became an issue. Uphill, I adopted a weird sideways style just so that my legs would not cramp, so I could keep moving. Eventually I came to the end of the first of those 3 loops. I'd taken over half an hour already, and with more than 4 kilometres to go, there was no way I was getting in before the hour. My race was over. In backyard ultra style, my finish is listed as a did not finish, DNF, but I completed 12 yards, which is 80.4 kilometres. That's in 12 hours. Now, I have to say, it was probably the most enjoyable, if not the best DNF that I have. For a bit of perspective, the winner hit 28 yards, which is 187.76 kilometres. This video is about how the race unfolded from my perspective. I know it doesn't do the race any justice. It's my attempt to get across the key aspects of this race. Hopefully I've portrayed some of what it takes for those who weren't there. Stay tuned for a breakdown of the numbers, what worked, what didn't, and what I would change in the future. Keep on running.
I've got a message of support from the kids. Nice. Can you take my time limit off my phone?
Yeah, sure.